What was that one really weird episode of an otherwise normal show? Boy Meets World. Psychotic episode. The episode is essentially a series of dream sequences, in which main character Corey, Ben Savage, murders his friends and family one by one in a variety of ways that involve lift shafts, strangulation, baseball bats, and so on. Boringly, it's all explained at the end to be part of Corey's worries about his impending wedding. While Ed and Eddie could hardly be called normal, it was pretty grounded in reality, Ed's antics notwithstanding. So, 1 + 1 = Ed is definitely the weirdest and most batshit insane episode of the entire series. TV Trope sums the episode up. 1 + 1 = Ed starts reasonably enough, with Ed asking Ed a bunch of questions, which become increasingly philosophical. To answer some of the less philosophical questions, the Eds start taking things apart to see how they work, which somehow leads to them taking apart the cartoon they're in, with increasingly strange results. The damage they're doing to their reality causes everything to become more and more nonsensical. Reality and imagination begin to melt into each other. Existential crisis manifests itself into abstract surrealism, and everyone and everything around them becomes horribly deformed and absurd. Tony Soprano's crazy dream sequence at a sales conference when he was unconscious after being shot. I don't know if it was a real episode or just a joke, but I swear I remember seeing an episode of Dexter's Laboratory where it's literally just the dad lining up a shot engulf the entire episode, only to completely miss at the very end. That one episode of Community where nothing weird happened. The French Mistake from Supernatural. Probably one of the weirdest episodes to made by any TV show, in case you haven't seen it. The main characters slip into a parallel universe where they are actually the actors on the Supernatural, using the actors' real names and everything. The SpongeBob episode where they go to the future and everything is chrome honestly scared me when I was a kid. The brunch episode of Bob's Burgers. I understand why they did it. It is the only Bob's Burgers episode one have ever and will ever only watch once though. The backwards episode of Seinfeld was weird when viewed the first time, but multiple viewings proved to me that it was genius. Kramer's sucker kept getting bigger, etc. When it started with the end credits I was pissed because I thought I missed it. This was live TV, back when I tied an onion to my belt, which was the style at the time. I don't know if you would consider it normal, but the underwater episode of BoJack was damn interesting. Star Trek Deep Space Nine had an episode where Captain Sisko woke up as a 1950s African-American science fiction writer trying to get his story about a space station commanded by an African American. So basically a 1950s version of DS9, published, of course, with the story being set in the 1950s. He meets a lot of skepticism about whether the public would embrace a series where the commanding officer is black at a time when segregation was still ongoing in parts of the country. Now, many of the examples here are about episodes that are not only weird in the context of their series, but also poorly regarded. This is not one of them. Far Beyond the Stars, as the episode was called, is actually well regarded by a lot of fans, and is actually quite a good episode. But it certainly was quite a change of pace from the usual shenanigans involving wormholes and squabbling space empires. That episode in Atlanta when Darius went to buy a piano from the creepy-ass Michael Jackson-type guy, Charlie Work. I don't know if I would call IASIP normal, but that episode was very different from the rest, but in a good way. The pacing and cinematography was amazing and it's actually one of the best episodes in the series, in my opinion. Malcolm in the Middle when Reese joined the Emery. It was super weird, and wasn't brought up or mentioned except for one episode later on. Child exploitation episode of Different Strokes was just a bad idea, even for Rick and Morty. The Dragon Sled episode was still a big WTF am I watching. That episode of Fairly Odd Parents where Cosmo gave birth. Pygmalion episode from King of the Hill. X-Files was pretty straightforward, but they threw a few curveballs. One was edited like an episode of Cops and another was a comic book motif. You ever see Dinosaurs? You know, that 90s sitcom with all the Jim Henson-ass dinosaur puppets that covered such classic topics like stale bedroom antics, steroid abuse, fighting a romantic rival to the death after he tried putting the moves on your wife in the frozen food section, homosexuality, herbivorism, and more? Yeah, the last episode was fucking weird. They had to explain to a fucking baby that its father's actions had led to a sudden onset of global fucking cooling that would kill off all the dinosaurs and end civilization as they knew it in an unknown period of time. And people say the 90s were a great time to watch TV. The first Ghost Facers episode of Supernatural. It's from the Ghost Facers' point of view. Beginning doesn't even look like Supernatural. Letterman did an episode when I was in college where the camera rotated slowly 360 degrees over the course of the hour. Well, all the episodes were weird, but the X-Files had some strange ones. One especially strange one had a lizard man bitten by a human. A reverse of the stereotypical human bitten by a werewolf. The lizard man turns human each day and is compelled to do human things. Like having a job at Kinko's. Doctor Who. That episode with a concrete slab. That thing literally gives head. It's canon that someone has sex with a face that's on a slab of concrete. The Uncle Grandpa special of Steven Universe. It was a fever dream. Do y'all remember the episode of SpongeBob where him and Mr. Krabs killed the health inspector and hid his body? I've been thinking about that one lately. Jumping the Shark, Happy Days. The episode of Friends where Ross tries to fuck his cousin. One of the only serious episodes of Family Guy. Brian and Stewie. The Fly episode. Breaking Bad. It's the Quenchist. Episode 1 Season 1 of Black Mirror. The Farbook episode of Letterkenny. The last 5 minutes of Mac Find His Pride on IASIP. Weird in a good way given his extremely different tone than everything else on the show. The drug addiction episode of Saved by the Bell. So over the top absurd. Nightmares and daydreams from Avatar: The Last Airbender. It was the episode right before The Day of Black Sun, parts 1 and 2. That whole progression to the fight scene between Appa and Momo. And they had voices. What? Scrubs Season 9. Speed Demon from the Powerpuff Girls. The whole episode was like one big undeserved guilt trip. That episode of Barry where he has some Kill Bill style kung fu fights and that little girl jumps off the roof. Also one of the new 2018 X-Files episodes where they are eating at an automated robotic restaurant. And the robots try to chase and attack them. Pygmalion and King of the Hill. Easily the darkest episode of the series. With, spoiler alert, Peggy and Lorraine totally murdering a guy in a meat grinder just as he snaps out of a psychotic episode. The tone of the whole episode is oddly sinister. It definitely reminds me of those lost episode creepypastas from back in the day. Musical episodes. Do people out there actually enjoy them? The claymation episode on My Name is Earl always freaks me out a bit. The Walrus episode of Pingu. That episode of Stranger Things. You know it, probably in like season 8 of Frasier when he has a mental breakdown because he believes that he's peaked by winning a Lifetime Achievement Award but only being in his 40s, 50s. I mean, I guess SpongeBob was normal enough. But then there was that one episode where Squidward was hallucinating or something. And SpongeBob turned into this giant worm thing. And then spiders crawled out of his eyes and mouth. Fucking weird. Man. That one episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender where Sokka drinks the cactus juice. The goddamn Groundhog Day episodes that any show with any form of a like supernatural vibe does. An episode of I Can't Do It. It's annoying and weird and annoying watching the Sami things over and over with very minimal changes for 30 minutes to an hour. Nope. Broken, which is first per second episode of season 6 of House. This episode is weird, because it's different from most House episodes since he is locked up in an institution. But it is also probably my favorite episode in the series. There was that one episode of Smart Guy where the two kids straight up get lured into the basement of a child predator through an online chat room. Okay, so The Amazing World of Gumball was a weird show just on its own, but they let the creators of Don't Hug Me I'm Scared make an episode that's somehow even weirder than the baseline. But at the same time it's perfect. Especially if you enjoy the abstract humor of DHMIS. https://youtube. hrad3rfhc90. I don't know if you could consider Adventure Time entirely normal. But that one episode where Finn and Jake go through the food chain cycle and become worms and birds is weird as all hell. That Johnny Karate TV show episode on Parks and Rec. The 80s sitcom episode on Mr. Robot, complete with laugh track. Ugh, not my fave. The Atlanta Season 2 episode about Teddy Perkins was so bizarre. It's by no measure a normal show, but the fact that it took a dip into straight horror, had almost no main characters other than Darius, and was 35 minutes aired without any commercials made it truly bizarre to watch. Donald Glover really outdid himself with that one. Especially when you learn that he played Teddy Perkins. The Boy Meets World episode that felt like a Halloween episode where our people were being killed but didn't air in October. The PFFFT Rock Bottom PFFFT episode PFFFT from SpongeBob PFFFT. It's a Wishful Life. Fairly Odd Parents. There was a soap opera that had a mad scientist controlling the weather such as blizzards in July. They carried it through the year, and when they had a blizzard the next winter on the show, they had no snow removal money left after a summer of plowing the streets. The episode of Daria where they try to fit in all the holidays into a single episode by having them be characters trying to get back to Holidayland doesn't fit anywhere in that series. It makes no sense. But I did learn about Guy Fawkes Day. That one episode of How I Met Your Mother in which everyone is rhyming the whole episode. It fills me with rage. Pearl Hates the Irish was bizarre and not in tune with the rest of Steven Universe. That episode of Arthur where he writes "Oh Jingle" for the Crunch cereal contest. It gave me unrealistic expectations for cereal. Cereal is never that exciting. For me, it was that episode of Bones where they go to Roswell. There were a few other episodes in Bones that were just weird AF. But not only did it have the alien possibility, but like, I've been to Roswell before. And it's not this tiny little pueblo. It's one of the larger cities in New Mexico, best service for AT&T in the state. And it is hundreds of miles away from the Mexican border. Not just a jog away. Again, probably weirder episodes in that show. But that one episode is permanently ruined for me. IDK about weird. But Scott's Tots is the one that ruined me from The Office. The Principal and the Pauper of The Simpsons. One of the most hated episodes of the entire show and made no sense. That one standalone episode of Lost that was like a murder mystery with a venomous spider and a bag of diamonds or something. And then the last season was all kind of that one weird episode. The French Mistake was hilarious. I forget what it's called, but that episode of SpongeBob when they killed the health inspector and tried to hide his body. The live broadcast episodes of 30 Rock. They were not terrible, and had some funny cameos. But I'd still prefer the regular format. Star Trek TNG. The episode when Q transports the crew to a dimension where they are all playing roles in a real-life version of Robin Hood. Interlude Party. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. The whole episode is essentially a weird acid trip recap of the show's first 2 seasons before the first proper episode of season 3. It's integral to watch upon first viewing because it gives the viewer insight into the mind of Hohenheim and why he decides to carry out his plan. but it is very skippable on a rewatch. Bulimia episode on different strokes. That was a weird episode for a kid. Moo Brooklyn 99. And it was the best episode I've seen from it. In the 70s and 80s some shows did very special episodes. All in the Family did 2 episodes dealing with rape. Fly from Breaking Bad. And yet, it's also amazing. 4th season of Community. The musical episode of Grey's